So there are two types of software we can talk about: system software and application software. Operating system can be considered as a part of system software. Okay, second thing that we need to discuss about what will happen when you switch on a computer until you will get, booting is a process where you switch on the computer and until the operating system loads. We call the time it takes is what we call, or the process we call the booting, right? So when you say this process, what happens? The operating system, whatever the code, it will be a code, isn't it? That will be in your hard disk usually, and then CPU takes this code and put it in the RAM. So loading all the instructions into the RAM is called, so whole booting process. Now, if you go into details, what will happen, right? If you go into detail, the very first thing what will happen is you are going to encounter what we call BIOS. So what a BIOS is, right? So whenever you switch on, you will have a small computer system which looks whether all the devices attached are working or not. So this is we call basic input output system. So that's the first one, CPU activates it. Right now, once it activates, computer performs what we call the post test. Post means power on self test. Basically, it will use to check all the hardware components, like whether your keyboard is working correctly, whether your mouse is working correctly, and so on. So it will make sure that you, as a first program, right, post is used, and then it will check the functionality. Let's say if everything is okay, then it looks for what we call the master boot record. So master boot record means in whatever, let's say hard disk, the very first record it will written. So this information is useful whenever you want to open up any particular, now in this particular case, we will look at the master boot record, which means the first few bits in the disk, and then using this one, it's going to determine whether this is, are you going to start with the Windows or the Linux? Because with master boot record, you can have multiple operating systems if you want. Like I told you, you can install Windows as well as Linux. So then what we need to do is the CPU needs to look at which one to use, right? And then computer or the CPU opens this operating system to put into the RAM, that means random access memory. Right. So once you finish this operating systems part, then you have the control of the computer and the display. So you can actually interact with the system. So this whole process is, we call it boot up process, or booting, meaning operating system is loaded into the RAM. Right, so that's about booting, meaning what will happen when you switch on your computer. Now that we have discussed this idea, we can discuss more on software part of it. Now, what is a software? So when you say a software means it's a given set of instructions. Right, there are various that we can do, but for the time being, right? So instructions we use to perform something, and then there are two types: system software, application software. So under the system software, we are going to talk about three things. First, operating system. Second, utility software. Third, language translators. Okay, now let me look at how this is actually can be represented using some graphical representation. So we have software, system software, application software, and then this set is there. Right. Now, let's look at more details. Now, system software, 3 types we discussed already: operating system, utility software, language translators. So let's discuss how we could, handle. Now, remember, you need some system software to interact with the hardware. So let's say you are the particular user, and through some application, you are going to access system software. Right. Okay. So if you look at this diagram, you will see hardware in the bottom part of it up. And then we have system software, application software, and the users. Right? Okay. Now let's look at utility software. So utility software means the software which supports your operating system. Sometimes they cannot include everything in their release. Right? And then we can use to support the system. Now, for example, if you use antivirus software. So why do you use antivirus software? Can somebody tell me why do you have to use antivirus software? Yes, I want everyone to type the answer. Can you type in the chat in your words? Right. Now, you know that with the internet and also the use of software through pen drives and so on, sometimes we'll get malicious software. We call it malicious means harmful software, especially if you are connected to the internet and you know um, most of the time, some websites, they automatically download some of the software which steal some information from your computer as well. So these are sometimes known as viruses, and for that we need antivirus software. Similarly, there are other tasks as well, which we'll call troubleshooting and diagnostic tools. Now, for example, disk formatting. Now, formatting means whenever you purchase a pen drive, for example, sometimes they are not formatted. Formatted means they are not, arranged to store data. So this formatting means you arrange the disk. So it separate out tracks and blocks and so on. Using that, what will happen, you prepare the storage device to save files. So that is one, utility software. Similarly, this defragmentation. You keep on, install, you remove software, what will happen? Your files will be scattered all over the disk, which means disk එකේ හැමතැනම තියෙන්න පුළුවන්. So we call those as fragments. Now, defragmenting means you are combining everything to put it in one place, right? So disk defragmenting means you use software to put all the bits and pieces together so that, it will improve the efficiency of your disk. Right? So the fragmented files you can put into a one space. So I'll come into the details, but for the time being, we can say antivirus software and also troubleshooting and diagnostics tools can be considered as utility software. Then the next one is language translators. Now, what we are going to learn in grade 11 is we will learn how we can convert our instructions so that computers can understand them. Now, when you write software, we usually use high-level programming language. High-level means when you want to type 2 plus 3, you say 2 plus 3. But computer doesn't understand this. 2, we have to make it a binary. 3 also we have to make it binary. Plus also we have to make it binary. So which means we need a translator to do this. So translators, what they do, they convert our high-level code into machine language code. That means, so the code so that computer can understand them. So converting high-level language into machine language, that is what will happen with language translators. There are many languages like Pascal, which is the one we are going to learn in grade 11. Let me record again. The first of all, now we were discussing what language translators are. It's like you are converting a high-level language code into machine language. High-level language code means, simple English instructions. We are going to convert into a machine language which consists of zeros and ones. Right. So we will discuss details this year in grade 11. But for the time being, remember there are 3 types of language translators. The 3 types of language translators are assembler, which converts assembly programming language into machine language. Then compiler and interpreter, again, both. There are some differences. For example, compilers convert the whole code. Interpreters convert 1 or 2, lines per day, right? Not per day, for a given time, it will read a couple of lines. Okay, so that's about the language translators. Now that we have discussed language translators, we can briefly look at what application software is. They are specialized software, piece of software we will use to do particular tasks. Now, when you want to say typing, we are using word processing software. So simply word processing means you can create letters, books, reports, and so on. So anything related to typing, typesetting, we call it, you can use word processing. It's application software. Then let's say you want to do perform some mathematical calculations, accounting. For that, we had to use spreadsheets. So you know that in Word, will get a blank page. In Sheets, usually you will get a set of English characters and then the numbers, which is right. Then presentation software we can use for electronic presentations, and database management system we can use to store data. Right, now we knew the application software. So let's look at some examples of operating system, right? So before start, let me have a small, quiz just to see like what operating system you have. I'm going to have a very small quiz. I'm going to use a small tool to do this. So in this one, tell me what is your operating system? Right, I'm going to share this. Can you see my screen?
Can't. And then
Right, okay. So I want you to type your operating system. Is it Windows, Linux, Mac, whatever you have. If you have Windows, tell me whether it's Windows 11, Windows 10, Windows 7, Windows XP. Type it like that. I want everyone to type your operating system. If you do not have a computer, you can say operating system of your mobile. Mobile also have operating system. I want everyone to use this tool. Go to www.menti.com and then you can type this code 688306764. Then type your answer. We can see by now, majority of you have Windows 10, 11, some you have Windows 7, and one person with Linux as well. Yes, others? About the others? Generally, we can say like most of you are having Windows. We can say that, okay, most of your operating systems are Windows, which is quite popular with general public. Then there are other things like Linux operating systems are quite, popular among the experts. You call experts in computer experts. They prefer Linux over Windows. And if you look at like servers available, servers means high-end computers. almost all the server computers, I think 99% of the time, they are using Linux-based operating system because of security reasons. Okay, thanks everyone for sharing your information on your operating system. So it's we can see some of you have the very latest edition of Windows, and some you have Windows 10 and Windows 7. Now it doesn't matter like which operating system you have, because the function will be the same. Right, now let's look at, we'll go back to the note again. We'll look at a little bit of details. So the right now, what we have is Windows 11. And there are like many versions. If you start with Windows version 1, I think in 1980s, they released, Windows 1.0. And when I am actually, like your age, we had like Windows 3.1. I think after O levels, yes. I remember I have used like Windows 3.1. And then we have Windows NT, Windows 2000, Windows XP. Then we have Windows Vista 2006, Windows 7, quite popular. I mean, still people are using. Now let me share the okay. Let me first of all change this. Windows, we have 11 came in 2021, isn't it? We have 2021 October, and then 10 in 2050. Yes, that's how it goes. And then if you look at the market share, meaning like now we have already seen so let me show you like some of so this stat count is a place where you can actually look at this kind of information, and then we can see let me show you stat count operating systems. If you type stat count operating system, it will tell us currently what is the operating system share market worldwide, right? Right now, you might be thinking it's Windows. No, it's not Windows anymore. Let me share. If you look at operating system world today, Android actually took over the operating system share market. It's about 40% is Android, and Windows is around like 30%. Then Apple iOS, it's about like 20%. Then OS X, unknown, Chrome X. So this is how it goes, right? Because when you say operating systems, there are Linux as well, but very minimal. Linux, I think less than 1% people are using. This is especially with all the computer types. But you can change now, for example, the desktop computers. If you click desktop, right? Now, in desktop computers, usually we are getting about 75% of the time we have Windows. I can see that the Parkma, the Windows operating system. Now you can see Linux about 2%, right? That's about desktop. Now let's look at like Asia. So how Asia is used. So if you look at Asia, in Asia, it's about 80% of us, we are using Windows, but you see Linux again like about 2%. 10% of, Apple OS6 means Apple. So this is how it varies, right? Okay, and then if you look at server market, I don't think we can see the servers here. So I'm not going to check that one, but let me show you like how was this before 2020. Now, in the year 2020, Asia, right, again, Windows were used. Windows operating systems, again, the popular one, right? Let me put all platforms. Again, Android was the top in 2020. If I go back in the history, like 2009, for example, I can go back up to 2009. This shows how the operating system market share. So it will take some time, right? So hopefully, yes, it's Windows almost about 100%. We have Windows, right? So you can see, you can look at the details. So I'm not going to spend time on that, but just to give you an idea, like people are using different operating systems, right? So let me go back to the Nota key. So you can see Microsoft Windows is one of the popular operating systems, especially for the general users. Make a note of this. This Microsoft Windows operating system is a proprietary software. Proprietary means Microsoft is on the code and nobody knows what is inside, meaning like it's not open to the public, which we normally call closed source, right? Copyrighted means nobody can change anything in Windows code. And not only that, it's a commercial software. Commercial means you have to pay for the operating system. Now, the cost of Windows is about, like, if I remember correct, about 20,000 rupees in Sri Lanka, if you want to purchase genuine Windows operating system. Now, similarly, the second one is Mac operating system or Apple operating system or OS. We normally say OS6 means OS 10. OX is for Apple computers, again developed by the Apple, by US company. Again, it is also commercial and proprietary software. Then the third one is the Ubuntu. Ubuntu is not really a separate operating system. Actually, Ubuntu is a distribution. The correct term for this is called distribution. Distribution means the Ubuntu actually built on top of Linux kernel. Kernel means the main software plus all the other software put in together, and you call it Ubuntu. So usually we use the term Ubuntu operating system, but it's actually a Linux distribution, we say. That means you get the Linux kernel, that is main program, plus other software. So even Sri Lankans create operating system called Hamtana Linux, which means again, they do the same thing. You got the Linux main kernel, add some programs that you need, and you can create. Right, that's how people come up with the distributions. Right. If you look at the Linux, there's a person called Linus Torvalds. When he was in Finland for his bachelor's degree, he's the one actually who designed this operating system. And you can see nowadays, like most of our servers, supercomputers run on using Linux, which is very popular among the technical crowd. The fourth one is Android. Again, Android is getting popular because this is developed by Google. And then again, this is what, dominant operating system in the mobile computing world. Remember, this is free and open source. Ubuntu also free and open source. Right. Yes, there were a couple of questions One is a Linux operating system. Is it more profitable, if not for more useful for designers? Okay, now Linux operating systems are not profit-oriented operating systems. Profit-oriented means now they are not for profit. So let me share like some of the Linux distributions, since you guys were very interested. Like here are like some Linux distributions. You can see most popular ones are listed here: Ubuntu, Fedora, SUSE, Arc. I don't know how to pronounce this one. Mandriva, Scientific, and so on. Even we have Bodhi Linux, Kubuntu, right? Parrot OS. So there's a one person. Yes, Parrot OS. Yes, Yonal, you mentioned about Parrot OS. So there are many others, many distributions that comes in. And I have seen person using Kali Linux for hacking, and also like that means ethical hacking. People are using Kali Linux troubleshooting. There are some distributions are there which you can use, right? Quite interesting Linux distributions. Okay, but one of the things I like it, let me show you, it's Slacks. I don't know whether this is still used. The size of the operating system is 200 megabytes. If you're wondering, 200 megabytes, that means you can have a small pen drive, very old pen drive, you can keep it. This is called Slacks. And actually, I kind of fond of Slacks for some time. During my university time, I use Slacks. You can, modify, you can decide what software you are going to have in the Linux Slacks and so on. So earlier this was very user friendly, but now then a little bit they have changed it, but still I think you can figure it out how to do this. So you can customize, you can decide what software you are going to have. Now, for example, if I want to have a computer set up with the operating system and word processing and spreadsheet, that I can do. If you want to go for gaming, then you make it for gaming. If you're like planning to go for, let's say, troubleshooting, then you can make it troubleshooting. So just you can have a look at it. Slacks is also another Linux distribution, which I think is the smallest one. To see the size is very small. So you can see even very old computers is enough, right? This I686, right? 128 megabits of RAM, that's enough, right? So yeah, so you can see that you can even run using these operating systems can be used to run very old computers. So with Windows, this is very difficult. And remember, this is Linux. Most of the time we say it's virus free. So you don't really worry about virus guard and so on. Right, so that's about the distributions or the operating systems. Next, let's look at the different types of operating systems. Now, types of operating systems means, for example, early days, only one person can work on a computer. Now, you might ask, now also we can work on one user. No, not like that. At early days, only one person can use the operating system. We call single use operating system. So when we have MS-DOS actually stands for Microsoft Disk Operating System, where we have text-based operating system. Only one person can use the system. Here, one uses mean like you can even connect from other computer to this computer. So doesn't necessarily, one person sitting in front of the computer. So one person may in front of a computer, but there are many others can join that computer. So that is possible. So the single user means only one user using the operating system. Then comes the multi-use operating systems. Now then people actually develop systems where, multiple users can work at the same time. Now, for example, if you take Linux operating systems or Windows, there's a special version called Windows Server versions can be used to work with multiple users. Then the third one, multitask operating system. Now, when I say single user, and most of the time it means like single task as well. You do only one particular task at a time. Like you type it, you listen and so on. You can't do both. If your system capable of doing multiple tasks, we call it multiple operating system or multitask operating system. Now, all our recent Windows versions like Windows 7, 8, 10, 11, Ubuntu, macOS, all these can be considered as multitask operating systems, which means while you are listening to a song, you can type it. Then there's a special category, fourth category, we call it. It's a real-time operating system. Real-time means at the same time. As soon as you do something, you should get a result, like automated teller machine, ATM machines are a special, piece of software. The operating system called real-time operating system because whenever you request money, you have to actually, withdraw money, right? So this is possible. Now, when it comes to operating systems, what you need to remember is main task of operating system, there are two folds. Karna dekak තියෙනවා. First one, operating system manages the hardware. That means physical components like keyboard, mouse, RAM, hard disk, whatever within the computer system. So the first task of operating system is it manages the hardware. Very important. You can see actually I have highlighted that. That's the first task of operating system. The other task is it should provide a user interface. Now in Windows, we see nice graphics. And then we have icons. So these icons represent some commands. Right? So operating system provides two things. It manages the hardware and also it provides the user interface. So let's first discuss managing hardware. So when you have managing hardware, we are going to talk about 6 things, right? There are 6 things we are going to discuss under this one. First one we call process management. Now let me show you process. Now if you go to your computer, right? If you take what we call the task manager, right? You can open task manager and see what is going inside, right? In my machine, so this is what I have. Right now you can see right? You can see, there are like 13 apps running in my machine, right? And you see there's a tab called processors. So these are the processes. For each application, there will be a several process. So if you click it here, you can see, right? I have opened up multiple documents under this. If I say Google Chrome, I have 32 tabs, you see. So all these, for every tab, you have a process. And then, so what do you mean by process management? So remember, whenever you use operating systems actually responsible for creating these processes. Now, let's say you open up a Word document or you are going to type something. So the operating system will create one or more process, right, to handle this. But remember, When you have multiple processes going on, right? CPU can handle only one. අපි මෙහෙම කියමුකෝ. බොතලට වැඩ දෙකක් කරන්න කිව්වොත් මොකද වෙන්නේ? දැන් මම කියන දේ අහගෙන ඉන්න ගමන් මම තව වැඩක් කරන්න කියනවා ඔයාලට. Can we do that? So if, for example, if you are watching a teledrama, while you are watching, you are trying to answer a call. This is not possible for many. Usually boys, we are very lack of multitasking, meaning you can do one thing at a time. Either you watch the drama or you answer the phone. But the girls normally say capable. But anyway, if you look at computers, the process CPU can work only one process at a time. So what happens? Whenever there are multiple processes, CPU has to work on one process for some time and then stop it. Then therefore, CPU has to go for the next process and so on. So this is called process management. So you can see that the CPU has to do a lot of things when you open up, multiple processes. That's the first one. Then second, there will be a memory management, right? Second one is called memory management. Now, when you open a lot of programs within your computer, for each process, you have to allocate some memory, right? So if I go to my task manager, you can see, right? Now here we have Google Chrome, and you can see the CPU usage is 0.7%. Memory is about 2 gigabytes. Disk usage. So that means, somebody has to allocate this, right? You can see Chrome is the one actually most consumes the memory, right? So for each process, operating system has to, allocate memory. What do you mean by that? Right? So for each task that CPU creates, you have to allocate some memory. And you cannot work with others' memory when you're sharing. Make sure that you are not collide with each other. So nobody can use it, right? So which means whenever you don't need memory, you have to clean it. So for example, you finish your work, then we need to clean the memory so that any other process can take that memory. So again, this is very, very important, right? Memory management. So memory management means you allocate the memory. So memory is allocated for various tasks in the main memory without collision. Then the first task is you need to allocate memory for each task. And at the same time, whenever you finish the task, like you finish your typing, you close Word, that means the allocated memory should be freed, right? Should release so that another task can take that space. Right. So that is about the RAM. Then the third one is we call device management. Now, device management means, now for example, let's say I want to take a printout. Right? Now, whenever I want to make a printout, I have to make sure that printer is connected to the computer. If I say printout and if the computer printer is not connected, we should get an error. So operating system has to manage all the peripheral devices. Peripheral means additional, devices which connects to the computer, like printers, scanners, and so on. Right? That's the first one. And then there are some other issues as well. Now, let's take CPU and network and printer. Which one is the fastest? Is it CPU? Is it the network? Is it a printer? Any idea? We have central process unit. We have processing unit. Then we have a network. Network technologies are there. No? And then when we have printer, which one is the fastest? Is it CPU is the fastest? Is it the network technology is the fastest, or is it printer? Which one is the fastest? Yes, any ideas? I got one answer. I just want to show you a figure for this one. Unfortunately, I can't find data transfer. Speeds. Okay, yeah. So usually, okay, I mean, I'm trying to find graph which shows you this, right? Performance of let me see, performance of CPU versus network. I cannot find, but usually, okay, this is how it works. Usually, the CPU is the fastest. Then comes the network. Then comes the other devices. So which means CPU is the fastest, whether we like it or not. Then comes the network technologies, comes as a second. Then comes the others. So now, when you want to send some data from one place to another, let's say you want to send a printout to the printer. CPU sends very quickly, but the problem is printer cannot process it very quickly. So we have to adjust this. Now this should be done through the operating system. So operating system should manage all these different devices, right? So when it manages devices, it has to check for the speed of the device, amount of information to be transferred, because there will be some RAM involved, like even in a printer, there's a RAM, right? Now, if you're sending too much data, printer cannot handle this. So remember. And the next one is the direction of where information flows. So sometimes there could be information going from CPU to printer, and sometimes it should come from printer to CPU, Likewise, there will be a direction. But one thing you need to remember, when you want to work with devices, you need to install device drivers, right? So what do you mean by device driver? That means the software that you need to communicate with the device, which we call device driver. Now, for example, when you take a printer, you have to install a piece of software. Nowadays, most of the time, our computers can understand or automatically install required software, which we call plug and play. But still, for some, we have to install a software separately, right? So that's called device management. Right. Fourth one, file management. Now, operating systems are responsible for handling files. Whenever we want to store some data inside the computer, in the hard disk, we have to create files. Now, operating system is responsible for creating files, naming files, renaming files, right? And organizing, meaning like you put into folders, you separate data, organizing, right? Even protecting files, you can encrypt, we call it encrypt files. We make sure that nobody can read your data. So we can encrypt, or we can password protect the files. And then again, like you make backups, right? So how many of you are using computers? Can you raise your hands? I'm just curious to see how many of you are using computers. Raise your hands. Now remember that this is very important question to ask. When did you last back up your computer? Computer is an electronic device, which means computer can get corrupt, lose your data and information. So, 4 more to go. Okay. Three more to go. So what happens now if you like switch on computer tomorrow, and if your computer is not working, what are you going to lose? Yes. What are the things you are going to lose? Are you going to lose anything? Let's say your computer is going to crash tomorrow. Tell me in the chat, what are you going to lose? දැන් හිතන්න පුතේ හෙට කම්පියුටර් එක වැඩ කරන්නේ ක්‍රෑෂ් වෙනවා කියලා. මම අහනවා ඔයාලට නැති වෙන්න තියෙනව මොනවද? Make a list. Just to see. Make a list of things that you are going to lose. Yes. We can see that like majority of the class, we are not backing up our computers. Like what are the things you are going to lose? Are you going to lose your memories? Yes, all data means what are the important things to you? Is it movies that you have collected? Is it the documents that you have created, what are the things that important ones you are going to lose. So remember this. This could happen, right? Anytime this could happen, right? If you do not have a backup, you can perform backup multiple ways. One is manual, meaning like you copy the important files into another, maybe pen drive or another, the hard disk. So that is one way to do this. Or else you can use software like Google Drive, Dropbox, iCloud. There are like synchronized version of document. You can set it up. But only problem is if you set it up Google Drive, Dropbox, then it will consume a lot of your bandwidth as well. Okay, so this is just for your information, right? So if I go back to our lesson again, interesting question, think about this. So we need, right, keeping backup, protecting, so everything comes under file management. So you can automate this one, meaning like operating system can create backups for you, right? If something goes wrong. Right. The next one, right? Then the next thing is a file system. Now, file system means the way the data is stored, right? So file system controls how data is stored and retrieved. Now, different operating system uses different file system. If you take Windows earlier had FAT16, FAT32. Now we have NTFS, right? So how do you know what file system uses in your computer? Right now, for example, in Windows 11, you can go to Start, you can go to Settings. So I'm going to go to Settings, right? Okay, I'm in the system now. Privacy and security. So there should be a privacy and security. So did I visit somewhere? We have privacy and security, and then file system. So you can go to, file system. So I'm checking. Okay, here is what we have. So we have, file system, right? So you can see the details. Right, now, if you go to your Windows Explorer, right? And if you go to particular file, so that right now I'm actually looking for a file, go properties. Yes, I can look at the details. What kind of a file it is, the details are given, right? And also, like, you can go to the file system. You can go to this PC, and then you have these drives. So right now I have only one drive. See, if you look at the properties, now it says in my disk, the file system is NTFS, right? So you could also see what kind of a file system it is. Early days, we have a FAT16, then comes to FAT32. Now the newer versions, we have NTFS, right? Okay, so that's about file system. So similarly, Linux, you have different file system. Mac, you have different file system, right? Then the file access. So file access, when you're accessing file, there are two types. First one, sequential access. Right? Sequential means there's a order in which you access the files. If you look at tape drive, so you read from start to the end consecutively. Yes, if you are a tape drive, you start with 1, 2, 3, 4, so, and you know, it's sequence, we call sequential access. But if you take, like, let's say CD, it's a random access. So from 1, you can access 2, then you can come to 3, 4, 5, you know, it's random. So there's no order when you're accessing files. Yes. Right? Okay, so the two types is sequential access, especially data in memory and tape drives, we have sequential access. Random access means you can access randomly. For example, if you take CD, you can go from one place to another place. There's no order. Okay, so now that we have completed 4, let's look at the 5th one, security. Right, now we need to secure the system. Now in operating system, there are various ways to do this. First of all, we want to prevent unauthorized access. Unauthorized means, you know, somebody is not authorized to access your computer. So simply we can use username and password. අපිට පොතේ username එක password එක පාවිච්චි කරන්න පුළුවන්. Then, you know, if others don't know, they cannot log into the system, right? And then we can have like firewalls. Firewalls mean sometimes, especially when your computers are connected to the internet, people can come from outside to break into your computer system. So we can also use like firewalls. Firewall mean it will actually control who can come inside the network and go outside the network. So this is called secure management. Then final one, it's network management. Now network, we know, I told you like the CPU is the fastest, the second fastest is the network. So nowadays we have both wired and wireless connectivity. We can have computers, printers, we can share, you know, all these devices and software through the network, right? Now, actually, you don't have to go to your workplace. You can work from home. You can connect to a computer at the workplace. So this is possible. So which means you can store anywhere and then you can access anytime from any device. You know, if you take Dropbox, for example, if you save your data in Dropbox, you can access Dropbox using your computer, using your mobile, you know, and you can use it anywhere you want, right? So all these are possible because of cloud computing technologies. Okay, now that we have discussed the sys tasks performed by operating system, right? That is the first part of first task of operating system, managing hardware. Second one, we can look for these user interfaces, right? Now, when you say user interfaces, I told you like how users can interact with the system. Early days, we had command line interface like this. If you type CMD, you will get a drive like this. And if you look at Windows Explorer, you will get like this. So nowadays, if you want to see what is inside C, you can go to this PC, you can go to C, and you can see there are a lot of folders. Now, similar thing can be done in command line as well. Right? In command line, what you could do is you have to type the command, and this is how we did it earlier. Right? You can go back to C, and if you want to see the files, we can type a command called dir. So when you type dir, what happens, right? You will get all the files you need, right? So when you type dir, so let me change the size. Yes, if you type it, you will get similar results like in earlier, right? So you will see the same set of files, adjustment program, binary tree. So all these are here as well. You will see same representation. This is text based and this is graphics. And let's say there's a file called IT509. You can go inside. So to go inside, you can type cd IT509. Now you are inside IT509 directory. If you look at the directory, so here are the files. You can see there are like a couple of HTML files, a couple of CSS files, couple of PNG files. So if you go here, you will see the same. So these are the HTML files and this is the CSS and these are some graphic files. There are two graphics files, star and star small, which you can see. So early days, what we had was command line interface, which we had to type commands. The problem is you have to remember the commands. Now instead, what we have is graphical user interface. So we have graphics. You don't have to memorize command lines, right? So and usually the Windows, you have these two lines. You have a title bar and a state bar, and then the three buttons: minimize, resize, and close. Right, now if you compare the use of command line interface with the graphical user interface, main thing is you don't have to remember any of the commands. Second one, you don't need a sound knowledge. Third one, you can use point-in device, right? Which is very useful when you're handling. Right, now here are like some of the things that we have discussed part of the screen, which I'm not going to go through, and changes. Okay, so let me briefly discuss about the utility software part. I already told you the software which supports our operating system, which you call utility software. So under that, there are many, software comes in. Here are some of them. You can have antivirus software. You can have screen servers or small programs which change the screen if the user is idle. Third one, this defragmentation. Once you use the computer, data get fragments, which we call fragmentation. And this defragmentation is, you put it into one single block. Then we have a backup software and disk partitioning software. That means we can, divide the hard disk into pieces, which we call partitioning. Okay, let me briefly discuss these ideas. Disk partitioning. Now, if you go to your computer and you can see how many, hard drives are there. So if you go to my one, if I go to this PC, you can see I will have, although we have this sum, these are like coming from Google Drive. Only partition I have is C. And you can see the details here, right? And let's say you want to divide this into 2 parts, then usually computer understanding using 2 characters like CD. So depending on how many partitions you have, you will get different, characters. Now, if you look at the reasons for why you have to use multiple operating systems, it's because of there could be multiple operating systems. So for example, if you use Linux operating system, to install Linux operating system, you need a set of partitions, right? This is called disk partitioning, right? So when you purchase a computer, usually we can divide the computer using disk partitioning into 2 parts like C and D, right? And then you can share. Next one is disk formatting. Now, disk formatting means, I told you, it's the preparation of the disk to store data. So when you get these different, data collecting devices, hard disk, USB drive, floppy drive, so you have to format it in the beginning. Formatting means you get ready the device to store. Then we have defragmentation, again software which actually use to put all the files in a one single place. Right, to finish our discussion for today, we can discuss about the file systems, right? And then to identify different files inside the computer, we use what we call the extension. Usually we have at least 3 letters or more, right? If you have exe, it means executable files. If you have doc and docx, then it's word files, right? Similarly, if you have BMP, GIF, JPG, PNG, they are graphic files. So likewise, computer can understand them, right? So others are like practical things we are going to discuss, but I think theory part we have done by now, which means we discuss how, in your case, operating systems handle these different tasks. So yes, you can see it's not an easy task, right? And there are 6 different things that you have to look after. Okay, so with that said, I think we can